And we are all here today to talk about what's going to what you're going to vote on in the next few days, hopefully. I'm Judy Weaver. I'm with the League of Women Voters, and we have 4 other people from the League that are helping out today, and you'll see them later on. 2 presenters, Jane Everham and Pam Turner, will be presenting some of the issues, and we have 2 monitors, Sharon Johnson and Fran Feinerman. Probably said that wrong, apologize. First of all, I want to thank you to the Poudre River Library Association for helping us put on this webinar for you. And also want to especially thank you to Ian Holmes, who has been our tech person. Thank you, Ian. Please put any of the questions you have in the chat. And after about 4 presentations or 4 ballot issues, then we'll stop and we'll go over the questions. This will make it easier, and I think it will flow better for everybody if we have that instead of doing it after each question. We may never get very far if that happens. This is a little different this year, as you know, and because of COVID. Usually we're sitting in a big room and we can talk to our friends and everybody that's there and walk around. And you would also have a ballot issue pamphlet in your hand that you would pick up that you could refer to while we're going through the ballot issues. Well, we still have those. The League of Women Voters put those out. These are available at all the libraries. They're in Spanish and English. They're also available at the libraries in Berthoud, Wellington, Loveland. So pick those up there. And then there are 2 local ballot issues, and they are at the libraries also. I should mention we have some available at the senior centers, both in Loveland and Fort Collins. So you can still get a hold of a ballot issue. But we also have an online presence. The League of Women Voters has a national platform. It's called vote411.org. And you can go online and get all the same information. Now, since it's a national league platform, you will need to put in your address. When you put in your address, it will bring up the ballot issues and the candidates just for our area, not nationally. So please do that. And when you bring it up, there's first going to be information about balloting deadlines and everything. So you'll want to go into an area that's it's called Explore Now, and then go to My Races. And I'll put that in the chat box when I'm through talking here, so you'll know where to find it. You'll come up with first the president and go all through the listing of candidates, even through our judicial candidates. And then it starts the ballot issues. So you will have to go towards the bottom to get ballot issues. Okay, this is what I would like to go through first. Let's see, I want to make sure I covered everything. Okay. Quickly to talk about referendums and initiatives. Referendums are referred from the state legislature. And depending on whether it's an amendment or a statute, a certain percentage has to be okayed by the legislature to get on the ballot. Initiatives. We're all familiar with initiatives because we've had people ask for our signatures as we're walking downtown or just going out for a walk. The initiatives are also on the ballot. They will need, a person needs to get, and I shouldn't say a person, actually, to get an initiative on the ballot, you need to have 124,632 registered Colorado voters that have signed these initiatives to get on the ballot this year. It varies year per year because it depends on how many people voted in the past years. Then there's also propositions and amendments to the Constitution. A proposition changes a Colorado law or a statute, and this can also be changed again by the Colorado legislature. Now, an amendment to the Constitution, which we will start out with, does not only can be changed by the voters. You and I can only change those amendments. And those are actually a lot harder also than to get rid of. So actually the first amendment that we're going to talk about is the Gallagher Amendment. And this is actually concerns property taxes, and it's a repeal of the Gallagher Amendment. Let me tell you what the major provisions are. It repeals the constitutional provision that requires residential property tax assessment rates equal to 45%, and the non-residential property tax rates equal 55% for the total share of state property taxes. So that would repeal that provision. Also, Gallagher, the major, another provision that it would repeal would be requirement that non-residential property tax assessment rates can be fixed at 29%. And the third, it repeals the requirement that the General Assembly adjust the residential rate in order to maintain 45-55% ratio of residential to non-residential property rates. I'm going to take a quick drink here of water. Excuse me. Okay, background. In 1982, the voters passed the Gallagher Amendment, and this is an amendment to the state constitution. This was in order to provide ongoing property tax relief to residential property owners. Then at that time, the residential property rate was 21%. And so because the residential property values have increased faster than the business property values, the General Assembly has had to reduce the property assessment rate over time and to keep that 45-55% split. Today, the residential property tax assessment rate has dropped to 7.15%, while the non-residential rate is still fixed at constitutionally amount of 29%. If the Gallagher Amendment is not repealed, residential property tax assessment rates will again be reduced in 2021. Property taxes fund local public schools, fire and police departments, hospital districts, city and county governments, and other services. Property taxes are paid by homeowners and non-residential property owners like businesses, farmers, and oil and gas operators. Now, because the requirement for voters to approve all tax increases, voters are often reluctant to make these changes and to increase taxes. So local governments no longer have the means to make up for lost property tax revenue when property tax rates fall. Now, as we know, because of this, the Front Range hasn't been affected that much because our property values have just skyrocketed. So the rates going down has actually helped us. But in the rural areas, the eastern and western areas of the state, we have had a problem there because they don't have the commercial property out there to make up the difference for their residential property rates going down. Now, if the voters repeal the Gallagher Amendment in November, the companion legislation of SB 223, that's Senate Bill 223, would take effect, preventing the legislature from changing property assessment rates for 4 years. So there wouldn't be any changes in the property assessment rates for residential for 4 years. So it'd stay at 7.15%, and the non-residential rates would stay at 29%. Now, this bill only takes effect if the voters statewide approve the repeal of the Gallagher Amendment. I want to give you an example of what the taxes are. If you look at the rate, we're talking about percentages. If you look at the actual value times the assessment rate times the mill levy, that's the taxes a person pays. So let's say there's a commercial and a residential place. They're each worth $100,000. The assessment rate for the residential is 7.15%. Commercial is 29%. This means that the assessed value is $5,112.25 for the residential and $29,000 for the commercial. For sake of just an if situation, say the mill levy was 100 mills. I like even numbers. That would mean the taxes would be $511.22 for residential and $2,900 for a commercial or farm, the non-residential, excuse me. Now, in the beginning, Gallagher was supposed to go up and down depending upon the valuations and how things were going on in the state. But because of Tabor, there hasn't been able to be any kind of increase in the rates at all. It always has to go down. Few more items. I just want to talk about what some of the people that are for and in favor of this change say. Repealing the Gallagher Amendment is not a tax increase. It freezes residential assessment rates at current levels. Homeowners won't forego any of the past reductions in assessment valuations that Gallagher has required, but they would give up further reductions. In a period of great division in Colorado, a bipartisan majority in the legislature, and as well as a broad network of respected business and civic leaders across the state, support the effort to repeal the Gallagher Amendment. So about 70 General Assembly people voted to put this on the ballot, and there are 4 repealing Gallagher versus 20 were against. So it's definitely a bipartisan initiative. Those opposed say under the Gallagher Amendment, residential property taxes will drop to 5.88% in 2021, but repealing the amendment will result in a tax rate remaining at 7.15%, which is a higher rate for homeowners. Repealing Gallagher will also leave the door open for the legislature to increase property rates in the future in order to increase the revenue. So that's what we're going to just talk about with Gallagher later on. If you have any questions, you can put that in the chat. I'm going to let Jane go on with the next amendment.
Hello, welcome all. I'm Jane Evram, a member of the League of Women Voters, and I'm going to talk to you about Amendment 6, Conduct of Charitable Gaming Activities. This is a referred proposal from the legislature to amend the Colorado Constitution to allow revisions to charitable gaming activities. Now, this is not the casino gaming. That's coming later. This is charitable gaming activities, and there are 2, bingo and raffles. The major provisions. This amendment allows bingo raffle licenses to hire managers and operators of games of chance, and it reduces the required period of existence for a charitable organization to obtain a big bingo raffle license from 5 years to 3 years. The background on this is in the past, charitable organizations needed to exist for 5 years before they could apply for a bingo or a raffle license. They also were required to have volunteers of their organization staff the charitable gaming activities. Those in favor of this amendment say this proposal would enable more nonprofits to increase fundraising via bingo and raffles, and hiring people would address the volunteer fatigue many of these nonprofit organizations experience. Those opposed say paid workers take funds away from the work of the nonprofit organization, and these activities begin to resemble for-profit gambling when they start to pay people to work the fundraising activity. So that's your Amendment C. And now I'm going to move on to Amendment 76, Citizen Qualification of Electors. Electors is a term that can be kind of confusing, especially with so much talk about the Electoral College. We're not talking about that. We're talking about voters. In this amendment, citizen qualification of electors is the same as citizen qualifications of voters. This amendment is a citizen initiative to change certain language pertaining to voting in the Colorado Constitution. And the language change that this amendment would make is to change from every citizen to only a citizen of the United States. And it would require all voters to be 18 years old to vote. Now, the background on this. Eligibility requirements for voting are stated in the Colorado Constitution, indicating only citizens can vote in Colorado. but it does allow extension of voting eligibility to persons under the age of 18. Since 2019, 17-year-olds, if they're registered to vote and will turn 18 before the next general election, are allowed to vote in the primaries. This amendment will prohibit eligibility for 17-year-olds voting in primaries. Those in favor say, this will prevent future policies that might allow non-citizens to vote. Those opposed say, this amendment seeks a solution to a problem that does not exist and could create voter confusion. It also prevents 17-year-olds from voting in primaries and getting engaged early in the voting process. Okay, that's me. And now I'm going to turn you over to Pam for the next proposition.
Hello there, everyone. I'm going to review Amendment 77, titled Local Voter Approval of Casino Bet Limits and Games. Now, this amendment has is both a change in the Constitution and a change in the Colorado statutes. It changes the Constitution concerning voter-approved changes to limiting gaming in 3 cities, Central City, Black Hawk, and Cripple Creek. And it amends the state constitution to provide for local elections in those cities to revise the limits applicable to gaming. It also authorizes voters in the above communities to increase the amount of single bet limits above $100 and to approve additional casino games. And it amends the state law regarding casino tax revenues to allow money to go to programs to improve community college student retention and increase credentials completion. So now the tax revenues from casino tax revenues do supplement student financial aid and classroom instructions in community colleges, but that those revenues are going to be used also for the student retention and increased credential completion. So when I say increasing amounts of bet limits to over $100, that refers to a 1990 a state-approved law that allowed bet limits up to $100. The new bet limits are don't have a limit. Any amount can be bet under this new statute. So in Central City, Black Hawk, and Cripple Creek. And they may also, if they vote to do so, can allow other games, so any games that they want to allow. Under current law, 78% of tax revenues from gaming is distributed to the state's public community colleges, junior colleges, and local district colleges to supplement existing state funding for student financial aid and classroom instruction programs. And this ballot, as I said, would expand that. Those in favor say that this amendment gives voters in the cities who have gaming approval to maximize the amounts that they can receive and add games, and that during the pandemic, unemployment numbers in those communities have been adversely affected, and it's a good time to increase the tax revenues. And then also, the goal of the measure is to boost travel and tourism jobs while providing more tax revenue to those communities. And the opposition to this says that removing bet limits may result in increased financial problems and pathological addiction when people don't have a limit on how much they can bet or gamble, and that those amounts might be too large. And also that it does, we know that by research that gambling may cost more to communities because there are impacts such as traffic, drunk driving, etc., mental health issues. And yet this doesn't give money to cover any of those impacts. And then also opponents say that it's an unstable source of revenue for community colleges because it's dependent on the economic conditions which vary. So those are the main provisions and pros and cons. And I think we're going to a question and answer break. So please put your questions in the chat for any of the four provisions that we've just discussed.
I don't see any questions so far.
Folks, do you want to quickly submit a question to the chat, or shall we move on? Any input, Fran?
Nope, not yet.
Okay, all right, then let's move on.
All right.
I'll go next. Oh, no, you're next. You're
I'm
doing E. Okay, I'm gonna,
Yes.
I'll mute.
Thank you, Jane. Proposition EE is a cigarette, tobacco, and nicotine products tax. And this is a referred measure from the legislature. So the legislature did approve this provision, but it has to be also approved by the voters. And it increases taxes on cigarettes and tobacco products, and it creates new taxes on nicotine vaping products. So it authorizes new tax revenues to be spent on expanded preschool education, K through 12 education, affordable housing, eviction legal assistance, tobacco prevention, healthcare, and general state spending. So this is quite an interesting, complex proposition because it has incremental increases in taxes over several years. But the minimum, if we say that the rate of tax might begin at 30% of the purchase price in 2021 and increase to 62% of the purchase price in July of 2027 on nicotine products such as e-cigarettes that are currently non-taxed. So by the time in 2023 and 24, this implementation increment has been increased to the maximum. A pack of cigarettes, for example, in July of 2024 will cost $7.50. And a pack of cigarettes January 2021 will cost $7. So during the first 3 years after the passage of this, funding would be directed to the state's general fund and primarily used for K through 12 education, rural schools, affordable housing, and eviction legal assistance. And then by 2023 and 24, the new revenue would be used to offer at least 10 hours per week of free preschool to every child in their final year before kindergarten. So not only are there increments to the taxes both on vaping products and tobacco products, but there are changes in how the revenue will be used as it increases through the years 2023 and 24. So those in favor say that Colorado right now has no tax on vaping products, and it has a high percentage of people who use those products. And it also has a high percentage of vaping among youth. So those in favor say that the vaping tax should reduce consumption of a highly addictive and harmful product. And I think I neglected to mention that Colorado has one of the lowest taxes on tobacco as well. And this measure would also, those in favor say, fund needed preschool and kindergarten services and have a very high quality preschool available by 2023. And those opposed say that many smokers use vaping products as a way to quit smoking tobacco. And so taxes on vaping products discourage smokers from quitting. And they also say that the youth vaping issue should be addressed in a different way through enforcement of existing regulations. And those opposed say also that it is a regressive tax that disproportionately harms low-income users of cigarettes, tobacco, and nicotine products. And they say that the state should not depend on tax revenue from addictive products to fund state programs. So that is Proposition EE. And I will turn it over to Jane.
All right, thank you, Pam. I'm going to talk about Proposition 113, which is adopt agreement to elect U.S. president by national popular vote. This proposal is a referendum petition seeking voter approval of previous legislation on the national popular vote interstate compact. Now, compact is an odd word, and all it means is agreement, but you're going to see it on your ballot and you're going to hear it a lot, so I'm going to continue to use it. But understand that when I say national popular vote interstate compact, I'm saying national popular vote interstate agreement. Its major provisions are: this proposition amends the Colorado statutes to allow Colorado to enter into an agreement among states to elect the President of the United States by national popular vote. It takes effect when enough states with enough electoral votes to form a majority, which at this point in time is 270, have joined the National Popular Vote Compact. The background on this: the National Popular Vote Compact is intended to assure that the presidential candidate with the most votes nationally will be elected president. States in the compact agree to give their state's electoral votes to the winner of the national popular vote, even if it is not the candidate that their state voted for. Currently, the candidate who wins 270 electoral votes wins the presidency, even if they don't win the national popular vote. This has happened 5 times in the past, most recently in 2000 and 2016, and prior to that, it happened 3 times in the 1800s. Now, understand that Colorado is currently in the National Popular Vote Compact, and that's because the Colorado governor and both houses of the Colorado General Assembly debated and voted to join the compact. This proposal, Proposal 113, asks voters to affirm or reject this action taken by our governor and our state legislature. Colorado becomes the 15th state to join the compact, and there's 15 other states and the District of Columbia in the compact. Those in favor say the national popular vote guarantees the presidency goes to the winner of the national popular vote in all 50 states and assures that one person equals one vote in every presidential election, regardless of where you live. Those opposed say Colorado's 9 electoral votes should go to the winner of the presidential contest in Colorado. And they say the national popular vote could result in more polarized elections and less consensus. There's no fiscal impact of this proposition, and it's really important to note a yes vote retains Colorado in the National Popular Vote Compact, and a no vote removes Colorado from the National Popular Vote Compact. Okay, that's Proposition 113. I'm going to move on now to Proposition 114, which is reintroduction and management of gray wolves in Colorado. This is an initiated proposal coming from citizens to amend the Colorado revised statutes to reintroduce and manage gray wolves in Colorado. The major provisions are to develop a plan to manage and reintroduce gray wolves to Colorado west of the Continental Divide by December 31st, 2023, and to use state funds to assist livestock owners in preventing conflicts with gray wolves and to pay fair compensation for livestock lost. Those in favor of this Proposition 114 say this would help restore the natural balance to the Colorado Rocky Mountains wildlife for generations to come, and this has been done successfully in other states. Those opposed say this will cause conflict with humans and animals that live in Colorado, particularly livestock. Since there are gray wolves in neighboring states migrating into Colorado, it makes sense to allow this to happen naturally and to give people time to adapt to their presence. Now, in the Blue Book, there is a map of the United States that I was going to copy and show you, but it's so faint and the print is so microscopic, it wouldn't have been any help, but you can look at it. And it shows the historical range of the gray wolf and where the gray wolf has been successfully introduced. This has happened in the following states: Minnesota, Wisconsin, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. Okay, that's Proposition 114, and now I'm going to turn it back to Pam.
Thanks, Jane. So now I'm going to review Proposition 115, prohibitions on late-term abortions. This is an initiative proposal to amend the Colorado Revised Statutes to prohibit an abortion after 22 weeks gestational age of a fetus. And it prohibits abortion after 22 weeks and allows an abortion after 22 weeks if the mother's life is in danger, and provides for a criminal penalty for anyone who performs an illegal abortion, and suspends for 3 years their medical license. So the background is that the US Supreme Court has ruled that a woman has the right to choose to have an abortion before the fetus is viable. And further regulation comes from the states which may regulate or prohibit an abortion after fetal viability. The state law must contain exceptions for pregnancies that endanger the lives of women, but this proposition does not include exceptions for rape, incest, or fetal diagnosis that says that the fetus is no longer viable after 22 weeks. So those in favor say, and I do want to mention that nationwide, 89% of abortions are within the first trimester, and 1% are performed after 21 weeks. So just to give you some sense of the percentages, and also abortions are decreasing every year in Colorado because we have easy access to birth control through pharmacies. So those in favor of this measure say that it places a reasonable restriction on abortion after viability, while still allowing a pregnant woman plenty of time to make a choice. And it would also, the proponents say that it does provide for still performing abortions when the life of the mother is in danger. And in no case also can a woman be penalized for having an abortion. The penalty comes to the abortion provider. And those opposed say that it would hurt real people going through unimaginably complicated personal situations, and that decisions around pregnancy at any point are best made by a woman, her family, and her physicians, not by politicians. And the third opposing view is that the proposal is intentionally confusing and being pushed by many of the same politicians and groups who have repeatedly tried to ban abortion outright in Colorado. So that is Proposition 115. So I think we're ready for more questions, and we can take whatever questions on whatever one if you've thought of some between then and now.
We have two questions from Patricia Scretney Lamb. The first is about EE, the cigarette tax. And Pat is asking, could you state again the change in the prices of cigarettes? That's to Pam.
Well, there's a table on the changes in the price of cigarettes. But what I said is the change as of January of 2021, and as of that date, cigarettes will cost $7 a pack. So that's this coming January. And at the end of the incremental increases in cigarette prices, July 2024, cigarettes will cost a minimum of $7.50 per pack. So the incremental, just so you'll understand a little bit better, the incremental increase is based on the average price, and those are minimums. So it's based on a percentage. The tax is based on a percentage of the minimum legal price of the cigarettes. So for example, the increase in a pack of cigarettes as of January 2021 would be $1.94, and the increase by 2027 would be $2.64. And I hope that answers your question. Please let me know if it does not.
We have one more question about that same proposal, and then I'll go back to the two questions about the gray wolves, but let's finish the EE one first. The question from Jean Taffy is, the money being raised is to pay for what and in what time frame?
Thank you for asking that. Again, that is it's kind of a bar graph that changes every year between 2021 and 2027. So for example, in 2021, it pays for K through 12 education, rural schools, and I forgot how they worded it. Let me just make sure I have the correct wording. It's legal support for evictions. And then these bar graphs, and I don't know if you can see that, but you see every year it's paying for different things. And in the end, or actually starting in 2023, the largest percentage of those taxes will pay for preschool, free preschool. And it's 10 hours a week of free free preschool for to get children ready for kindergarten.
Okay, we have two questions on Proposition 114 about the wolves. One is Patricia Sprintney Lamb. Does anyone gain financially by allowing the wolves? And the second one from Michelle is, where does the money come from to pay ranchers for loss of livestock? Is it taxpayer dollars?
Okay, let me answer that second question first. It is taxpayer dollars. It will come for state funds. I also want to share a little bit of extra information that if this passes, the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission will be required to develop a plan to introduce and manage the wolves in Colorado. They will hold statewide hearings about scientific, economic, and social considerations, periodically obtain public input to update that plan, and the funds to compensate livestock owners will come from state funds. The plan implemented will be managed by the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, and the state would need to obtain federal approval prior to the reintroduction. And what was the first question?
It was, where does the money come from to pay? No, actually, the first question was, does anyone gain financially by allowing the wolves?
Yeah, the state of Colorado does, because these funds will not only be used to manage the wolves, it will be used to manage wolf habitat, which will be restoring riparian areas, waterways, the natural wildlife, what the natural wildlife depend on. So our state physically will benefit. Any person that benefits from the introduction to the wolves? No.
There's a third question, which is very current, from Patricia. Will it be a problem to introduce the wolves after the damage by the fires?
That's a wonderful question, Pat. I mean, looking out the window today, I don't know. Who knows? We don't know what our state is going to look like when this finally ends. I think absolutely, since the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission need to create a plan, it could forestall the reintroduction. But that's my personal opinion. That's not based in fact. It's just based on concern for our natural environment. Thanks for asking that question, Pat.
I don't see any further questions.
Could I add something about the tobacco tax? I think I mentioned it in the beginning, but one of the other things that the tax will be used for, and on nicotine and vaping products, it will also be used for affordable housing. And I don't know what the details of that are, but that is another use for it. So I wanted to make sure that I added that. And I also wanted to make sure that I added that the casino vote proposition is backed by casinos. So it's a citizens initiative, but that's the main backer of that initiative. And the tobacco and vaping tax was a long time effort through the state government to figure out how to tax those new products and deter children from using them. So I think that's helpful.
Okay, shall we move on? And I will go on to Proposition 116, State Income Tax Rate Reduction. This is a proposal. This proposal is an initiated amendment to the Colorado statute, which decreases the state income tax rate from 4.63% to 4.55%. Now, the background on this: in the mid-'80s, Colorado went from being a progressive tax rate system to a flat tax of 5% on all taxpayers. This created revenue for the state, and the excess revenues were diverted to Colorado taxpayers by the 1992 citizen-initiated Tabor Amendment to the Colorado Constitution. Now, if you remember, Tabor requires all tax increases in the state of Colorado to be approved by a vote of the voters. And they set a bar for how much money the state could raise. And if the taxes raised more than that amount, the excess had to be returned to the taxpayers. In 2000, the rate was lowered by the state legislature from 5% to 4.63%. The state income tax is the main source of general fund revenue and the primary source of financing state government. Currently, most of the money in the general fund goes to fund healthcare, education, human services, and other state programs. So this is a proposal to lower taxes and also lower the amount of revenue Colorado State gets. Those in favor say, this proposal reduces income taxes for all Colorado taxpayers. The state revenues have increased every year for a decade, and this proposal will reduce state revenues by less than 0.05%. Those opposed say, few taxpayers would benefit from the proposed cut. 75% of taxpayers would receive less than $50 per year. People with incomes over $500,000, which is less than 2% of the population, would receive over half of the total tax savings. Colorado's economy and its people have suffered loss during this time of COVID-19. These cuts would add to losses in healthcare, education, transportation, and other state services. Okay, that's Proposition 116. I'm going to move on to Proposition 117. Voter approval for certain fee-based enterprises. This proposal amends the Colorado Revised Statutes to require voter approval for some fee-based enterprises. Now, the Colorado Constitution defines state enterprises as a government-owned business which issues bonds and receives less than 10% of its annual revenue from the state. Its revenues come from fees for goods and services. A prime example of an enterprise is Parks and Wildlife, who receive revenue through hunting, fishing licenses, habitat stamps, boat and vehicle registration, and state park entrance fees. Major provisions are, this requires voter approval for state revenues that have or are projected to have revenues of more than $100 million from fees in the first 5 years of their existence. It also combines the revenues of two enterprises that start at the same time with the same purpose, and they combine their revenues to equal $100 million in the first 5 years. And the background on that, the Colorado Constitution definition of enterprises was included in the 1992 Tabor Amendment. And since 1992, the number of enterprises has grown from 6 to 22. All these enterprises charge a fee for service only from the people using the service. If a new enterprise receives more than $100 million in its first 5 years, it is required to go to the voters for approval. After 5 years, it does not need to go to the voters. This proposal goes into effect January 1, 2021, and it will only impact new enterprises after that date. So the 22 that exist now do not fall under this, but any new enterprises will. Those in favor say, fees are growing, and this revenue falls outside the limits of Tabor and is just a way around Tabor. This money should be subject to oversight. Voting on fees puts power in the voters' hands. These fees are no different than taxes. Those opposed say, enterprise rules were approved under Tabor and are operating now as they were intended. The enterprise fees make those who use the services provided pay for them, not taxpayers. Okay, that's 117, and now we'll go to Pam.
Okay, so now we're all the way up to 118, Paid Family and Medical Leave Insurance Program. So this is an initiated proposal that amends the Colorado revised statutes to create a statewide paid and medical leave program for workers. And I just want to say up front, in case I forget, that it really doesn't begin until January 1 of 2023. So it creates a statewide paid family leave and medical leave insurance program and division within the Department of Labor and Employment. And it provides partial wage replacement for up to 12 weeks a year for eligible employees taking time off for medical reasons or to provide care to family members. And it requires premium payments to be split between employers and employees. And so as an example of what it would do before I go into the background, because like the other tax proposals, there are charts and graphs and bar, to explain where all the money will come from and what it means. But as an example, if someone were an employee making $52,000 a year, they would have to pay, as would their employer, $4.50 each week into this medical leave insurance program. So that would mean for them and for their employee, $234 per year for someone who made $52,000. And that is about an average income for many places in Colorado, which is why I use that example. But this proposal would create a state-run medical leave insurance program. And employees would qualify if they had worked for an employer for at least 180 days, and self-employed individuals can opt out of the plan. And I'll tell you who else can opt out in a minute. But qualifying employees receive a portion of their regular weekly pay, not to exceed $1,100 per week for up to 12 weeks per year. Benefits are payable for an additional 4 weeks, so that would be 16 weeks total, to eligible individuals with a serious health condition related to pregnancy or childbirth complication. So the benefits are paid on a biweekly basis, and qualifying conditions for the program include a serious health condition, caring for a newborn child, caring for an adopted child or a child placed through foster care for the first year, caring for a family member with a serious health condition, circumstances related to family members' active military duty, an individual's need for safe leave due to domestic abuse, sexual assault or abuse, or stalking. So those are the qualifications for benefiting for this insurance. And premiums are collected through payroll deductions. And the employee is required to remit its contribution to the Family and Medical Leave Insurance Division within the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. So the employer and employee payments would begin January 1, 2023. And again, premiums split evenly between employees and employers. Premiums may not exceed, I think it's 10%, no, may not exceed 1 2/10% of an employee's wages. And employers with approved private family and medical leave plans are not required to pay premiums provided by the private plan. So employees taking leave are also protected against discrimination and retaliatory measures by the employer upon their return to work. And that's also an important provision, and must be restored to the position held by the employee when the leave commenced, and restored to an equivalent position when they return. So if you look at I think the amount, the percentage that people would be paying is 0.9%. So it's 0.0009 times whatever you make. And there is a table, and there's also a timeline in the Blue Book, because the whole program really has to be figured out to implement it, because it's a whole new part of the Division of Labor and Employment. So those in favor say that nearly everyone will need to take time to care for themselves or their babies or a seriously ill family member at some point within their working career. But today, only 1 in 5 Colorado workers has access to paid family leave and medical leave. And those who need it the most are the least likely to have it. And also, a lack of paid family and medical leave coverage has become very obvious during coronavirus time, when many people are needing to not work and take care of themselves or their families. So it would make sure that 2.6 million Coloradoans can take care of themselves or their families without losing their jobs. And it also allows them to compete, allows small businesses to compete with large corporations who already have paid family leave. And those opposed say that it's a tax increase that requires employees to pay into a program that they may never benefit from using. And employees are already faced with job uncertainty and in the current economy, and cannot afford to lose part of their salary or other benefits, even if it's a small percentage. So, and they also say that the opponents say that it creates a new and expensive bureaucracy that is an appointed position. And yeah, so I think that's all that I have. But again, I think the best example is if you make $52,000, it costs $4.50 per week to you and your employer. So Q&A break again.
We have 3 questions that are on the paid family leave. I think we should do them first. And then we have a couple of complicated questions about previous stuff. So let me ask Pam the Proposition 118 ones first. From Patricia Stretney Lamb, if nationally payroll taxes were stopped, would that affect this program? Are there any other states that have a similar program? And does the program still apply if the employee works remotely in Colorado for a company based outside of Colorado? And I can repeat those if those are too much.
That would be great to repeat those one at a time. So,
Okay.
well, I could say something about the payroll tax, because the payroll tax is a federal tax. And this is a state program. So it's more like insurance
Okay.
than a tax. You're paying into an insurance program similar to the unemployment program.
Okay. The other one was, are there any other states that have a similar program?
Yes, there are, I believe, 8 other states, and the District of Columbia also have that program.
Okay.
So
And the
yes,
third
there are.
question was, does the program still apply if the employee works remotely in Colorado for a company that's based outside of Colorado?
You know, I don't know that, but I think that if you work in Colorado, I mean, that would be an interesting thing to check on, because if you work in Colorado, you still pay Colorado taxes, Colorado unemployment insurance, correct? So, but I don't know that. I didn't see that, but we could look that up and try to find the answer to that. You know, and while I'm answering that, Fran, I wanted to also say that I was going to talk about who doesn't have to opt into the program. So employers with 9 or fewer employees don't have to opt into the program. Self-employed individuals don't have to opt into the program. Local governments that decline to participate do not have to opt into the program. And employers that already have approved paid family leave don't have to do it either. So I hope that answers.
Okay. So there's a question from Linda Hoffman. It's 2 parts. Would you please explain the difference between an amendment and a proposition, and when something should be an amendment as opposed to a proposition, and vice versa? And she's also asking, do you know who is behind Amendment 77? And if the residents of those towns support it? So that was the casino. Pam.
So I'll start though with the amendment and the propositions. Excuse me. Very smoky here. I don't know about where you're at. The amendment is an amendment to the Constitution, and a proposition is just a change in our laws. And of course, the Gallagher change is a repeal of what we already have as an amendment. It's to take something out of our Constitution. The proposition would change state laws. Later on, the legislature can change it any way they want to. So if something, any of the items that were on today's ballot issues are propositions, we may vote one way. The state legislature can change that later on. That's different than a constitutional amendment. And the first amendment, we had amendment B, C, actually, we had 4 amendments, the first 4 that we talked about. And those amendments to the Constitution can only be, first of all, voters can only change the Constitution. So once something comes up for the voters to change in an amendment, they're the only ones that can change it back. The legislature cannot do anything to that. An amendment to the Constitution is longer, usually. It takes a lot to change the Constitution. It also has a lot more implications to what the General Assembly can or can't do. And so if you want, or a voter wants something to be harder to change, they would put it as an amendment to the Constitution. And if it's a proposition, would be just a change in the laws. I hope that answers the question, Linda. And then the Amendment 77, I cannot help you with.
Yeah, I can answer that one, Judy. So I can't remember the name of the casino's name who started the initiative, but they just built a huge new casino in one of those towns. But if this is both a constitutional change and a revised statute change. And the cities of Black Hawk, Central City, and what's the other one? Cripple Creek are all voting for this the same day that we're voting for it. So we don't really know who's for it or against it of the citizens right now. But we do know that Gilpin County has not taken a stand, but Teller County supports it. And if the cities do support this new way of having casinos and bet limits and new games, the Colorado Gaming Commission will establish new rules, and that will begin May of 2021. So you probably could find the name of the casino. I'm going to say in the Denver Post or some, someplace like that. But sorry, I don't remember the name and I didn't write it down.
Okay, we have one more question. This is on Proposition 116 from Jean Taffy. Does the increased population of the state offset the decrease? With the pandemic, are we not already running short of income? And what other initiatives would be in place to make sure basic things are taken care of? For example, education, roads, healthcare, etc.
That's a really smart question, Jean. And I wish I was a smart answerer. I'll do my best. The state government has already taken a huge hit, and so has education, healthcare, transportation as a result of COVID-19. The state population may increase, and that may increase some funds, but it also increases the number of people the state has to take care of. So this is more my observation than necessarily facts. But if you remember what I said about who's supporting and who's opposing, the state has taken a huge hit from with its revenue because of COVID-19, and it's impacting agencies. And our income tax is a flat tax, and so the flat tax, it means it hits lower income people harder than higher income people, and the same is true when we remove that tax. Lower income people get a lot less, higher income people get a whole lot more. So it may be a wash, I don't know. I wish I had the facts on that. In terms of the initiatives, that's an excellent question, but that needs to go to a legislature, not me. So do you want us to move on now to the?
Yeah, there are no more questions on so far.
Okay, Pam, you want to go ahead with 2A or should I do 3B? I'll go ahead with 3B.
Sure, go ahead with 3B if you're ready. That's great.
Yeah, I'm ready. 3B is the ballot question. 3B is for the town of Berthoud, and this is a study bill. This is not an action bill. It's authorizing the town of Berthoud to opt out of Colorado State Bill 152. And in 2005, the Colorado General Assembly enacted Senate Bill 152, which prohibits local governments from providing cable television services, telecommunication services, or high-speed internet services, either directly or indirectly, unless such services are authorized by the electorate. And the town of Berthoud wants to begin to look into that. A voter-approved exemption from State Bill 152 would allow the town of Berthoud to evaluate all possibilities for municipal broadband services. The town of Berthoud has stated that it is not prepared to provide broadband services and does not currently have a plan to do so. Opting out of State Bill 152 would not increase taxes nor obligate Berthoud to provide broadband infrastructure or services. It would simply remove the prohibition on expending public funds to provide service, and it would allow the town to explore and develop plans for the future. Those in favor of this measure say, this measure will not increase taxes or obligate Berthoud to provide services, but rather remove, well, I just repeated that. Local options should remain open. Local citizens should be the ones to make the decisions on how best to improve connectivity within their communities. And this has already been done successfully by other communities up and down the Front Range. Those opposed say, residents can already get fast internet from Comcast, CenturyLink, and other providers. The city also has fiber optic lines connecting the municipal building to emergency facilities for city services. Private sector providers oppose cities, towns, and other government entities building, owning, and operating broadband networks where existing networks are in place. With or without voter approval, if government-owned networks are going to compete with private entities, there should be a far more level playing field. Government should not be able to use taxpayer dollars to overbuild existing networks and then compete against private companies for customers. Okay, that's Berthoud's 3B. Pam, are you ready?
Yes. So I'm presenting the City of Loveland 2A, which is to impose an additional sales tax of 1% to support the city's public safety, infrastructure, and capital equipment and operations and maintenance programs. And an additional sales and use tax of 1%, except on food for home consumption, would be imposed beginning January 1, 2021. The City of Loveland is experiencing a budget shortfall as a result of increased cost of services over time. And they say that it's been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent recession. And so they project a budget shortfall in 2021 of approximately $15 million. And so they're proposing this 1% tax increase, sales tax increase, which has not been increased since 1984. So they've had a 3% tax since 84, and they're going to make it 4%, and it doesn't apply to groceries for home consumption. So the City Council says that the allocation of the funds will be for public safety, 20%, construct and maintain the city's infrastructure, 50%, and municipal operation and maintenance, 30%. So they indicate it would generate approximately $18.3 million its first year, and over the next decade, approximately $236.8 million. So those in favor say that the tax increase would be used to increase wages of first responders, such as firefighters, currently who are paid about 17% less in Loveland than in neighboring communities. And it would be used to pay for services that are currently provided to the citizens, not to grow government, but to maintain the government that they have. So they think that every 35 years is reasonable for 1% tax increase. And those opposed say that the City of Loveland should look for other ways to increase revenues, and they suggest boosting tourism efforts and increasing the revenue there. And they feel that the burden of increased sales tax would be too great during the COVID pandemic. So that is 2A. And now we're ready for the final questions, I believe.
Yes.
Yes,
People can, yes.
there aren't any more questions unless somebody can come up with them. There aren't any on 2A or 2B and 3A. So
They can ask questions on any of the issues if they still have them.
right. Does anybody put in the chat any questions you have on any of these issues?
I would like to say a couple of things while people are putting questions in the chat, because we have a really important meet and greet on Saturday, and it's something that the library is also sponsoring. So on Saturday, from 2 to 3:45, all of you would have a chance to talk to the candidates for 8th District Attorney and for Commissioners District 2 and 3. You need to sign up on the league's calendar, go to Saturday and click on the event for meet and greet, and then you can sign up and you will get information or get a login for Saturday to meet and greet those, like I said, the 8th District Attorney's Office and County Commissioner's Office. last chance to ask any questions.
No questions have come in, but I think a lot of information's been provided.
And I just put in the website for the league that you were referencing in the chat, if people want to pull that off.
Oh, great. Thank you, Jane. Well, I'll go ahead and finish up then if we don't have any other questions. You all should be receiving your ballots this week. I received mine on Monday. I don't know about the rest of you, but it will not, shouldn't be, oh, the link, Jane, I'm seeing that it says it only went to panelists. Could you change that and send it to everybody?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Now, if you don't get your mail-in ballot this week, I would check with the county clerk's office. You can see if you're registered by going online. One of the most important things to remember, if you have moved since the last election, you need to go in and change your address because they do not forward ballots. Very important. Don't expect a ballot if you have moved. Now, voter service and polling centers will be available in every county in the state. And voter service will be able to accommodate everything. They will be able to register you to vote. They can actually take your ballot at that time. You can make changes to your address, and you can also vote by machine if you would like. And those places will be open October 19th to November 3rd. Let me see, all ballots will be due by 7 p.m. on November 3rd, 2020. Is there any other questions? Anything else we would like to cover? Well, thank you very much for coming and becoming an informed voter. That's an informed voter. And have a good day. Don't go outside.
Thank you very much.
Bye all. Thank you.